Chapter 1800. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two followed behind Qin Ai and looked at the environment of Tiangang's sect. Now it seemed that Tiangang's sect really had a different world. The size of the area was really amazing. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two did not communicate. After all, they were very afraid of the palace master in front of them. In the process of going to Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two also met a lot of disciples who were coming here. All the disciples would bow and greet Qin Ai when they saw him. However, Qin Ai still had an indifferent and amiable look on his face. The eyes of the crowd of disciples couldn't help but fall on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Today was the day when the new disciples reported, and everyone was very familiar with the process. At this moment, looking at the situation, they knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two would be cultivators of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall in the future. I didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to choose Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Palace Master Qin's temper has always been very good. It's not strange that Bailey Hongzhuang came to Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. It seems that Bailey Hongzhuang did not use her privileges and intends to cultivate in Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. That's not necessarily true. We have to see Bailey Hongzhuang's performance later to know. I think that since Bailey Hongzhuang has been confirmed to be the future wife of the young sect master, she probably doesn't need to work so hard. As early as Bailey Hongzhuang had been staying in Bewitching's palace, many disciples thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was likely to follow the young sect master to cultivate in the future, and would not go to one of the four main halls to cultivate. Now looking at the situation in front of them, they knew that their previous guesses were wrong. The real situation was not like this. Xia Jiqing listened to everyone's discussion and could not help but frown. It seemed that everyone still had a lot of guesses and doubts about the boss. The speed of Qin Ai and Bailey Hongzhuang and the others was not slow. After a long while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally arrived at Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. A huge palace appeared in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two, magnificent and spectacular. At a glance, no one would think that this was just a side hall. My God, Vermilion Bird Palace Hall is so big, it's shocking. Xia Jiqing's face was filled with shock. She knew that Tiangang's sect had always been big, but the situation in front of her was a bit too amazing. Such a large hall was only one of the four main halls. Didn't this mean that the other three halls were also of the same size? I wouldn't have imagined it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. We'll be cultivating here in the future. It looks pretty good. The corner of Bai Junyu's mouth held a trace of a faint smile. When he first saw this Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, he had a feeling of yearning. Thinking that he would be cultivating here in the future, he couldn't help but feel happy. Bailey Hongzhuang also had some feelings in her heart. This was the heritage of the sect. Compared to 1,000 years ago, the sect today was undoubtedly more magnificent, giving people a sense of shock. In the center of this palace, there were three big words written in flamboyant calligraphy: Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Although it was only 3 words, from these words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two could feel an indescribable sense of sharpness. There was sword intent condensed in these words. After staring at these words for a long time, they only felt a pain in their eyes and could not continue to look at it. After seeing the reaction of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Qin Ai also introduced it. Chapter 1801. Listening to Qin Ai's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's eyes were filled with shock. The first sect master of Tiangang sect. Tiangang sect had been passed down for many years, and the first sect master existed many years ago. However, those who were the first to establish a sect were usually the most talented people. To open up a sect in an environment where there were so many sects, the process was definitely difficult and not simple. The first sect master's swordsmanship must be extremely powerful. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. How much understanding of the sword did he have to be able to integrate the sword intent into the words? Qin Ai smiled and nodded. Her expression was full of admiration and reverence. The first sect master's swordsmanship was indeed superb, and no one could compare to him. Even in the history books of Tiangang's sect, it was recorded that the first sect master's swordsmanship was fierce. The reason why the first sect master was able to open up the sect was because of his swordsmanship. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two also showed admiration. If there was no first sect master, then there would not be the current Tiangang sect. In the sect, many disciples who practice swordsmanship often come to look at this plaque and comprehend the sword intent in the words. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. We can rely on these words to comprehend the sword intent. Yes, the first sect master integrated the sword intent into the words in order to let the disciples of the sect benefit infinitely. In this way, any cultivator who practices swordsmanship can comprehend from these words. 100 years ago, there was a disciple who understood the sword intent in the words in my Tiangang sect. His swordsmanship was unparalleled among the younger generation of cultivators. He got the true inheritance of the first sect master. With Qin Ai's voice falling, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's eyes looking at the plaque had changed. They never thought that the words in the plaque turned out to be a kind of inheritance. It was really unexpected. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu didn't know what to say at the moment. They always felt that after coming to Tiangang sect, they had a feeling of being country people entering a city. Everything here showed a strong and deep foundation. There was not a single thing they could casually ignore. After noticing the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two, the smile in Qin Ai's eyes deepened. She said, "After you have stayed in Tiangang sect for a long time, you will know all of this. Now report to the resource elder." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two looked in the direction that Qin Ai was pointing at and noticed that there was an elder not far away. "Thank you, Palace Master." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two thanked Qin Ai for her guidance. Naturally, the hall master would not be in charge of their living arrangements. It was already an honor for the palace master to lead them to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall on the first day of reporting. It should be known that it was extremely difficult for cultivators to meet the palace master. As long as nothing major happened in the sub-palace, the palace master would not appear. Qin Ai slowly disappeared from the sight of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Only then did they turn around and walk towards the resource elder. "Greetings to the elder." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two respectfully bowed. "We are the new disciples who came to report today." The elder then looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. After noticing Bailey Hongzhuang, his eyes changed a bit, and then he smiled. Chapter 1802. The key to your room, the disciple uniform, and the sect manual are all in the Qingkuan bag. You can take a look at it yourself. The place where the disciples of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall live. After you enter the hall, turn left, and each room has a number written on it. All you need to do is to enter your own house according to the house number. If there is still something you don't understand, come and ask me. The resource elder said aloud. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two took the Qingkuan bag and immediately knew the room they lived in. "Thank you, elder." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two bowed again. As far as they were concerned, there was nothing they didn't understand. The elder nodded slightly, and Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two left. The inside of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was also very bright. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two went to the left according to the elder's instructions. The scope of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was very large. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked to the place where the disciples lived, they found that the number of rooms here was really not small. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two found their respective rooms. Fortunately, because the three of them came to Vermilion Bird Palace Hall to report together, their rooms were also adjacent. Haha, our rooms are connected. It will be convenient in the future. Xia Jiqing's face was full of excitement. She had made up her mind to be together with the boss. If they lived far away, or if they didn't practice together, it would undoubtedly make her depressed. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. This feeling is similar to when we were in Azure Water College. Thinking back to when they were in Azure Water College, the three of them also lived on the first floor of the special enrollment dormitory. Now the situation was exactly the same, and had not changed. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu looked at each other and smiled. After Hongzhuang said this, they really felt that the situation was very similar. Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door and saw that the room also had everything, and the treatment was very good. Compared to the living environment in Azure Water College, it seemed to be better here. No wonder so many cultivators are racking their brains to enter the sect. This treatment is indeed excellent. Bai Junyu sighed faintly. Living here was the dream life of many cultivators. We'll be living here for a long time in the future. The environment is pretty good. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and smiled. This place was spacious enough for her to place an alchemy furnace or draw inscriptions. In comparison, the dormitory of the Azure Water School was not as big as this one. As for some daily necessities, they had already prepared them in their Qingquan bags, so they only needed to tidy up a little before they could move in. Xia Jiqing did not enter her room, but followed Bailey Hongzhuang into her room. Boss, how have you been in Tiangang sect these days? Xia Jiqing asked with concern. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I'm doing pretty well here. Just like you guys. To her now, Tiangang sect was her home. That was because her grandfather was here. Her grandfather was the only relative she had found in the world. Xia Jiqing, who was still a little worried, couldn't help but feel relieved after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. The Great Elder didn't embarrass you? I always feel that the Great Elder is not easy to deal with. Chapter 1803. Feeling Xia Jiqing's concern for her, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but hold Xia Jiqing's hand. Her beautiful face was filled with a gentle and touched smile. On the first day I came to Tiangang sect, the Great Elder did come to trouble me. As soon as these words came out, Xia Jiqing couldn't help but show a nervous look. I said that the Great Elder is not an easy person to deal with. He will definitely come to trouble you. Don't worry, the Great Elder is now in confinement. Otherwise, what you saw just now would not be the second elder, but the Great Elder. Xia Jiqing frowned, and there was a bit of joy in her eyes, but more of it was astonishment. The Great Elder is in confinement? Did the young sect master do it? Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head slightly. The sect master ordered it. It is estimated that he will not come out in a short time, so you don't need to worry. Xia Jiqing's expression tightened, and she approached Bailey Hongzhuang, her eyes full of curiosity and joy. Boss, has the sect master already agreed to you and the young sect master being together? Anyway, now that Han Shilling is gone, no one is your competitor. The young sect master likes you so much. The sect master should not object anymore, right? Since the fall of Han Shilling, Xia Jiqing felt that the path of the boss was much smoother. After all, Han Shilling was a big stumbling block. What's more, the sect master's attitude towards the boss was also good. Obviously there was no dissatisfaction. The sect master did not object. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Now her grandfather was very satisfied with her and Bewitching together, and only hoped that they could get married soon. Whether it was her, Bewitching, or her grandfather, they all decided to hold the wedding after they rescued their parents. That's great. Xia Jiqing was overjoyed. This was undoubtedly excellent news. Now that the Great Elder is in confinement, there is no way to destroy you and the young sect master. It seems that it won't be long before the boss becomes the young sect master's wife. Looking at Xia Jiqing's happy appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but smile. Now there were no obstacles between her and Bewitching. Compared to the heaviness when she first came to Tiangang sect, the current result was undoubtedly much better. There were still 2 hurdles in front of them that needed to be crossed. She hoped that everything could be crossed like this one by one. Bailey Hongzhuang then looked at Xia Jiqing. There was no problem between her and Bewitching now, but the problem between Jiqing and Junyu seemed to have not been resolved. How are you and Junyu now? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Xia Jiqing's expression, which was originally full of joy, suddenly stiffened and fell into silence. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang understood. She sighed. Bai Junyu and Xia Jiqing were usually talkative people, but when it came to this kind of thing, the two of them could only remain silent. In this regard, she also felt a burst of helplessness. After a long while, Xia Jiqing's voice lowered a bit and said, Junyu, he should like Xiaoman. She always felt that Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman would have a lot of common topics together, and they would be more comfortable getting along. Yuan Xiaoman was a person who couldn't hide her thoughts on her face. Everyone could see that she liked Bai Junyu. Now she only felt that she might be an obstacle between them. Chapter 1804. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Xia Jiqing's lost appearance and couldn't help but feel distressed. When they were at the Kanglin College, Xia Jiqing obviously didn't have any thoughts about Bai Junyu. However, after getting along for such a long time, she felt that Xia Jiqing had gradually begun to like Bai Junyu. Women understood women's minds more. Not to mention, she and Jiqing had been sisters for several years, and she was also very familiar with the changes in Jiqing's mood. Since Junyu chose to cultivate with us in the same hall, it proves that the person in his heart is you. Don't belittle yourself. Bailey Hongzhuang said. Men's thoughts have always been very simple. If Bai Junyu liked Yuan Xiaoman, then Bai Junyu would definitely choose to be in a group with Yuan Xiaoman, not with them. Bai Junyu's thoughts have been proven by his actions. Xia Jiqing shook her head. Even if he chooses to cultivate with us in the same hall, it doesn't necessarily prove that he has me in his heart. On weekdays, he clearly prefers to get along with Xiaoman. These days, she had been paying attention. When Bai Junyu was with her, he clearly didn't talk as much as he did with Yuan Xiaoman, and they got along more naturally. It was precisely because of this that she became more and more unconfident. In fact, Xiaoman's appearance was outstanding, and her family background and strength were better than hers. It was normal for Bai Junyu to like Yuan Xiaoman. Seeing that Xia Jiqing had been changing the topic, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. Jiqing, don't always deny Junyu's feelings for you, and always think that Junyu's approach to Xiaoman is true. If you continue to do this, you will only become more and more unconfident. Think about it carefully. Isn't Junyu more special to you? Bailey Hongzhuang felt a burst of helplessness. Whenever a woman really liked a man, she would often become like this. Xia Jiqing clearly didn't believe her. Xia Jiqing shook her head, inexplicably irritated. Now she increasingly felt that Bai Junyu didn't like her. However, immersed in such a mood, her mood was also very bad. You only see Junyu and Xiaoman chatting well. Why don't you say that you also chat well with Dongfang? However, once you're in front of Junyu, you don't know what to say. Junyu is very likely to be in the same situation as you. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed faintly. At times like this, many onlookers could see more clearly. It was precisely because they were just friends that they got along so well, that there was no need to worry about other problems. And once you stand in front of the person you like, you will unconsciously feel nervous, worrying about how you should behave, so that the other party won't hate you, so that the other party will have a better impression of you. Because most of his emotions were immersed in this place, he would be particularly passive when interacting with others, and he would speak less. In her opinion, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu belonged to such a situation. As long as this window paper was not broken, this problem would continue to exist. She really admired the endurance of Bai Junyu, Xia Jiqing, and Yuan Xiaoman. Struggling under such circumstances was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. Yet they were able to continue walking like this. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing was shocked. Chapter 1805. If this was the case, then, did it mean that the person Bai Junyu liked was still her? Xia Jiqing's heart couldn't help but beat faster. During this time, she felt more and more that Bai Junyu and Yuan Xiaoman were a real couple. Sometimes she even wanted to quit. However, Bai Junyu often appeared in front of her, and she couldn't just let it go. It had been 3 years since she knew Bai Junyu. Since they met at the Kanglin College, Bai Junyu had always been by her side. She clearly remembered the scene of the first time she met Bai Junyu. She still remembered Bai Junyu's expression at that time. It was just that, unknowingly, things had come to this. She didn't know when things began to develop like this, but the current situation was really not what she wanted to see. Noticing the change in Xia Jiqing's expression, Bailey Hongzhuang knew that she had understood a little. All of this depended on Bai Junyu's thoughts. Now that Yuan Xiaoman was not in the White Tiger Hall, if Bai Junyu still did not take any action, then she had to talk to Bai Junyu. Originally, she didn't want to intervene too much, so she didn't say much. If the situation had reached a situation where she had to say something, then for the happiness of her good sister, she decided to say something. In this way, whether it was for Xia Jiqing or Yuan Xiaoman, it was excellent. Bailey Hongzhuang patted Xia Jiqing's shoulder and said, "Think about it." Xia Jiqing looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang, then nodded. "Okay." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly, then picked up the sect manual and looked at it. It recorded their cultivation process and what they needed to do in the Vermilion Bird Hall. Only after understanding all this, they knew what to do next. Bailey Hongzhuang carefully looked at everything recorded in the manual. After 3 days, they could go to the martial arts field of the Vermilion Bird Hall to cultivate in the morning. In Tiangang sect, the activities of the cultivators were relatively free. The martial arts field was divided into 2 parts. One was the sitting area, and the other was the martial arts field. The meditation field was the place where the disciples cultivated together, while the martial arts field was the place where the cultivators exchanged pointers and practiced their martial skills. Normally, most of the cultivators would cultivate in the cultivation field, because the cultivation fields of the 4 major branch palaces all had a special barrier. Cultivating there, the essence energy would be denser, and the cultivator's strength would also increase faster. Similarly, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall also had 2 rankings. One was the cultivation ranking, which recorded the cultivation of all the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples. One was the combat prowess ranking, which recorded the combat prowess of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples. Cultivation and combat strength were not the same. Even among cultivators of the same cultivation, there would be a certain difference in combat strength. These 2 lists were usually placed on the training field, and anyone who came here would be able to see them. It was precisely because of this that the cultivators at the bottom would definitely feel humiliated. This method could also promote the cultivation of the disciples. After all, when everyone around you was working hard to cultivate, while you were the only one who remained stagnant, even you would feel ashamed of yourself. Looking at these 2 lists, cultivators would clearly know their ranking in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Chapter 1806. In addition, in Tiangang sect, there was a place to receive cultivation resources called the Resource Hall. Every month, cultivators could go to the Resource Hall to receive their own resources. These cultivation resources were often resources such as medicinal pills. With these resources, a cultivator's cultivation speed would be much faster than usual. The reason why all the cultivators in Shengxian continent wanted to become a member of the sect was because of the rich spirit energy here. Cultivating in the rich spirit energy would have twice the result with half the effort. Unknowingly, one could surpass the cultivation of the cultivators in the outside world. On the other hand, it was because of the rich cultivation resources in the sect. As everyone knew, medicinal pills had always been a necessity for cultivators. However, the price of medicinal pills was also very expensive. Except for some extremely rich cultivators, it was impossible for the average person to have so many cultivation resources. What's more, the alchemists in the outside world were not as good as the alchemists in the sect. In the outside world, many medicinal pills were priceless. Even if one had money, they could not buy the medicinal pills they needed. As for the rules here, they did not have to abide by many. Some places they should not go, such as the sect master's palace, the junior sect master's palace, the palace master's palace, and so on. As long as they did not receive an order, the conference hall was also a place they could not set foot in. In Tiangang sect, in addition to the 4 halls, there was also the alchemy hall and the inscription hall. The number of alchemist disciples in the alchemy hall was also not small, and the treatment of the disciples in the inscription hall was even better. However, the number of disciples in the inscription hall was much less than the number of disciples in the alchemy hall. This was because the requirements to become an inscription master were higher than that of an alchemist. Here, the status of both the alchemy hall disciples and the inscription hall disciples was very high. However, the status of the disciples in the 4 halls was not bad. However, the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. This law was applicable everywhere. When Bailey Hongzhuang was looking at the sect manual, Xia Jiqing also looked at it. After understanding all this, she felt that everything here was more free. Even if they were not in the same hall, they could often go there on weekdays. Tiangang's sect was to give them a place to cultivate freely. As long as there was nothing major, the hall master would generally not come forward. It was a free-range guide. Boss, I heard from the hall master that there will be other new disciples coming to Tiangang's sect in a few days? Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang suspiciously. She thought it was just them. She didn't expect there to be other cultivators. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. The scope of Tiangang's sect is so large. Although the requirements for the disciples recruited each year are high, the number of people is not too small. The assessment competition was only one way for Tiangang's sect to recruit disciples, and there were other ways. Some disciples from aristocratic families would also come to the sect to cultivate, but these disciples would not be the most outstanding disciples of the aristocratic families. Maybe it was because they couldn't get the best treatment in their families, so they came to the sect to cultivate. If they achieve outstanding results in the sect, then when they return to their family, their status will also rise by a lot. Chapter 1807. I didn't expect the pressure of the cultivators in the aristocratic families to be so big. I thought that the disciples of aristocratic families were very great. Xia Jiqing sighed faintly. It seemed that no matter who it was, they would have some troubles. She used to think that the children of aristocratic families were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. They would live a life of luxury, and were not comparable to ordinary people. Now listening to her boss's explanation, she only felt that what she thought before was too simple. Everything was not so easy. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. It is precisely because their resources are beyond the reach of others that the family's requirements for them are higher. In a cultivation aristocratic family, there would be many cultivators in the younger generation. Under the accumulation of rich and excellent resources, almost every generation would have amazing talents. On the contrary, under the same cultivation resources, the return of some children was not proportional to their efforts. Then the situation of these disciples was undoubtedly extremely bad. The bigger the family, the crueler it was. Xia Jiqing nodded slightly. The strength of those aristocratic family disciples should be stronger than us. I feel that if I don't work hard, I am afraid that I will really be at the bottom. Even if the performance of the aristocratic family disciples, who came to Tiangang's sect, was not outstanding, compared to the cultivators, who came from the grassroots, their strength should be stronger. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and said, "It is not so absolute, but we do need to work hard. The palace lord is right. Coming to Tiangang's sect is just a starting point. What kind of results we have in the future will depend on ourselves." Xia Jiqing's eyes changed a bit. She had rested for 3 months, and could be said to be extremely relaxed. However, today was only the first day in Tiangang's sect, and she felt an indescribable sense of tension. This feeling was as if there was a flood beast chasing after her. As long as she slacked a little, she may be swallowed into the stomach. She did not dare to not work hard. She had to work hard because she did not want to be at the bottom. Looking at Xia Jiqing's dignified expression, Bailey Hongzhuang patted her shoulder and said, "Jiqing, don't be so nervous. Your performance in the assessment competition is very good. Not to mention your talent is not bad, and your strength has improved very quickly. Back then, we also came here one by one when no one was optimistic about us. Now the gap between us and the other cultivators is not that big. Do you still not have confidence?" After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing, who was originally a little tense, also relaxed a little. "Boss, you're right. I'll definitely work hard." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "I just reported in today, so I don't have much to do. Why don't we go to the resource hall to collect cultivation resources? Obtaining cultivation resources would definitely be beneficial to their cultivation." "Sure." Xia Jiqing nodded. She was also very curious about what kind of cultivation resources the Tiangang Zone disciples would have. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing were about to leave, Bai Junyu's voice came from outside their door. "Jiqing, Hongzhuang, Do you want to go to the resource hall to collect cultivation resources? Hearing this voice, Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing looked at each other and smiled. They immediately opened the door and went out. Chapter 1808. Bai Junyu looked at Xia Jiqing's beautiful smile and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He always felt that the Jiqing in front of him at this moment was very different. From the end of the assessment until now, he had not seen Jiqing smile so happily for a long time. Recalling all the things in the past, at this moment, when he saw Xia Jiqing speak to him so brightly, his heart was filled with emotion. He only hoped that he could often see Xia Jiqing smile like this in the future. Xia Jiqing saw Bai Junyu staring at her, and her pretty face couldn't help but blush. She said, "What are you looking at me for?" Bai Junyu was stunned, and then he retracted his gaze. He touched his forehead and said, "No, nothing." Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu in front of her, and the smile in her eyes deepened. Bai Junyu and Xia Jiqing like this. If someone said that they didn't like each other, no one would believe it. Let's go. I think Dongfang and the others should be going to the resource hall to get resources now. Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. With the voice of Bailey Hongzhuang falling, Bai Junyu and Xia Jiqing both nodded. The two immediately followed Bailey Hongzhuang in the direction of the resource hall. The resource hall was in the center of the 4 major halls, and there was a certain distance to get there. Today, they had just become cultivators of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, and the 3 of them were in a very good mood. At this moment, walking on the road of Tiangang sect, the 3 of them had a happy smile on their faces. In the process of going to the resource hall, suddenly, a voice came into the ears of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. "Look, isn't that the future wife of the young master?" "That's right. Who are the man and woman behind her?" "They are all friends of Miss Bailey, and now they have become disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall." "In this way, doesn't it mean that they are our junior brothers and sisters?" "That's natural. The woman in the green dress is very beautiful. At first glance, I have a good impression of her." A man's eyes stopped on Xia Jiqing's body, his face full of excitement and love. Xia Jiqing's appearance was very delicate and pretty. After 2 years of experience in the assessment competition, her delicate and pretty face had a trace of heroic spirit, and she was even more beautiful. What's more, Xia Jiqing's figure was excellent and curvy. Even in the entire Tiangang zone, there were very few women with a hot body like Xia Jiqing. Bailey Hongzhuang is the young sect master's woman, and now the entire Tiangang sect does not dare to have any thoughts about her. However, the new female disciples had always been the focus of the male disciples. "Not bad. This woman's looks are indeed outstanding. You have good eyesight." A male disciple kept looking at Xia Jiqing. His eyes were filled with excitement, as if he couldn't wait to come up and greet Xia Jiqing. However, after pondering for a long time, he ultimately did not walk up. This movement was not small. The man may have deliberately attracted Xia Jiqing's attention, so his voice was not hidden at all. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others heard this conversation clearly. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips could not help but evoke a smile. Jiqing's appearance was very outstanding, and there would be many disciples pursuing her in Tiangang sect. Chapter 1809. For a long time, Xia Jiqing had been following Bailey Hongzhuang. The men they met would be attracted by Bailey Hongzhuang at a glance, and few people would pay attention to her. After all, the boss was really too good. No matter when, he attracted everyone's attention like the sun. She never thought that there would be other people paying attention to her now, which really surprised her. However, in addition to being surprised, she also felt a trace of joy. At least, there were still people paying attention to her. During this time, she had been belittling herself, only thinking that she might be an ugly duckling. Today, after a conversation with the boss, coupled with the current scene, she only felt a little more confident in herself. Compared to Xia Jiqing's happiness, Bai Junyu's face was gloomy. Now that Xia Jiqing was getting more and more beautiful, more and more people were paying attention to her. However, he had been stagnant, and there was a sense of insecurity in his heart. If he continued to delay like this, would Jiqing be chased by other men? At the thought of this, Bai Junyu's face was ugly. This was not the situation he wanted to see. He thought that this time he could cultivate with Xia Jiqing in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. He could shorten the distance between them. But now it seemed that in this Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, his opponents were not few. It seemed that he had to hurry up and act. Bailey Hongzhuang casually looked back and saw Bai Junyu's gloomy face, and the smile in her eyes became more and more intense. It seemed that there was no need for her to communicate with Bai Junyu, and they could solve this matter by themselves. After walking for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two finally successfully arrived at the Resource Palace Hall. The Resource Palace Hall was also a palace. It was divided into 3 floors and looked very solemn and noble. Every layout showed the heritage, and people did not dare to be too casual. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two could not help but feel a little emotional again. Every place in Tiangang sect gave them a feeling of extreme amazement. This kind of big spending, they could only see it in the sect. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two were about to go in, a familiar voice sounded behind them. Hongzhuang, you've also come to the resource hall. Hearing this voice, even without looking back, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others knew that Dongfang Yu and Gong Xiaoqing had arrived. The 3 of them turned around and saw Gong Xiaoqing, Dongfang Yu, and Pan Zimo walking over together. Pan Zimo clearly got along very well with Gong Xiaoqing and Dongfang Yu. After all, they had helped each other during the exam. Coincidentally, we don't have anything to do today. Naturally, we're here to collect resources from the resource room, Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. How do you feel in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall? Gong Xiaoqing asked in a deep voice. Xia Jiqing smiled slightly. When I first saw the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, I was quite shocked. However, I see that this Tiangang sect's restrictions on their disciples are not very strong. In the future, we can still often interact. Dongfang Yu chuckled. When we first saw the Azure Dragon Palace, we were also shocked. The entire palace was azure in color, as if it was a coiling azure dragon. It really isn't simple. Just as Dongfang Yu had said, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall where Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were in was completely red, representing the flames of the vermilion bird. Chapter 1810. Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Although they did not cultivate in the same hall, at least they were all in Tiangang sect. There were not many restrictions on the disciples here, and it was very simple for them to get together on weekdays. Although there was some distance, for them as cultivators, it was not a distance at all. I have long heard that the cultivation resources of Tiangang sect disciples are very rich. Today I can finally come and see it. Pan Zimo smiled. Tiangang sect was a place he had been yearning for a long time. Today, he could finally become a member here. He had not yet woken up from such a surprise. Listening to Pan Zimo's words, everyone's face was filled with a touch of expectation. Let's go in. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the joy and eagerness on everyone's faces and immediately said. Everyone nodded, and then walked into the resource hall. There were many disciples in the resource hall. Today was the beginning of the month, and the beginning of each month was the day when the cultivation resources were distributed. Therefore, the disciples of Tiangang sect would come to receive the resources these days. As Bailey Hongzhuang and the others walked into the resource hall, they saw that the entire resource hall was very bright. Looking carefully, they found that the resource hall was also divided into several areas. At first glance, Bailey Hongzhuang saw the resource room of Zhuke Palace Hall. Dongfang Yu and others naturally noticed this situation, and there was a touch of surprise in their eyes. It seems that the disciples of each branch hall will receive cultivation resources in their respective areas. In their line of sight, there were not only the resource rooms of the 4 branches, but also the resource rooms of the Alchemy Palace and the Inscription Palace. This simple appearance gave people a clear feeling at a glance, and they could not help but have a good impression of it. This was the large sect they yearned for. No matter where it was orderly. I don't know if the cultivation resources of each branch hall will be different. Xia Jiqing's eyes flashed with a curious light. Although the 4 branches of Tiangang sect all belonged to Tiangang sect, everything was separated. Gong Xiaoqing's handsome face was filled with wisdom. The cultivation resources should not be different. They were all new disciples. And it was reasonable to say that the things they were allocated should be the same. Hearing this, Xiaojiqing nodded. It should be so. I'm just a little curious. Let's not stand here in a daze. Let's take our cultivation resources first. Dongfangyu smiled. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were about to go to their respective resource rooms to receive resources, a familiar and joyful voice entered their ears. Boss, you're all here. Glancing to the side, he saw Yuan Xiaoman, Yuan Jixin, and Dong Hongyan walking out of the White Tiger Hall's resource room. You've already received your cultivation resources. That's quite fast. Dongfangyu also greeted them. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. That's right, we're all here to collect cultivation resources. Yuan Xiaoman walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Her charming face was filled with amazement. Boss, Tiangong sect's reputation is really not just for show. I finally understand why the strength of the sect's disciples is so amazing. Their cultivation resources are much richer than the outside world. Chapter 1811. These cultivation resources. She usually couldn't have so much in a year, but in Tiangong sect, it was only a month's worth of cultivation resources for cultivators. With so many cultivation resources, coupled with the yuan li here that was richer than the outside world, it was impossible for the strength of the cultivators to not improve faster than the cultivators in the outside world. In the past, she always heard that whether it was a cultivator from a sect or an aristocratic family, the reason why they could have such impressive strength at such a young age was that they were completely piled up with resources. She had never understood what it meant to be stacked with cultivation resources. Now that she had come to Tiangong sect, she completely understood. They were currently just new disciples of Tiangong sect, but they already had so many cultivation resources. If they performed well in the White Tiger Hall in the future, these cultivation resources may even rise, which was too terrifying. At this moment, she finally understood why the genius cultivators in the aristocratic families were able to look down on others at such a young age. This was not entirely because their cultivation talent was outstanding, but more because of their generous conditions. She believed that even with her talent, if she was from a cultivation family, her strength would be extremely powerful now. Listening to Yuan Xiaoman's words, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Yes, it is because of this that there are so many cultivators who want to enter the sect. Xiaoman, I was originally curious about how many cultivation resources there are, but now listening to you, I am even more looking forward to it. Xia Jiqing's face was full of excitement. It seemed that the cultivation resources were really rich to the point of being surprising. Haha, then you go and get the cultivation resources first. Yuan Xiaoman chuckled. Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing looked at each other, then walked in the direction of the Vermilion Bird Hall. Gong Xiaoqing and the other two no longer stayed, and immediately went to the resource room of the Azure Dragon Hall. Yuan Xiaoman, Yuan Jixin and Dong Hongyan walked out of the resource hall, and waited for everyone outside. At this moment, there were many cultivators in the resource hall. If they all stood in the resource room, wouldn't it be very troublesome? Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two arrived at the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's resource room. An elder was standing there. When he saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two appear, he said, "Give me your identity medallions." Earlier, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had obtained identity badges from the Qingquan bag from the resource elder of the White Tiger Palace. After hearing the elder's words, they immediately took out their identity badges. Bailey Hongzhuang handed her ID card to the elder. After checking the information on the ID card, the elder said, "New disciple." Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. The elder then recorded Bailey Hongzhuang's information in his handbook. After that, he said to Bailey Hongzhuang, "Go to the back and get the cultivation resources." As the elder's voice fell, a disciple behind the elder showed a respectful smile to Bailey Hongzhuang. "Junior sister Bailey, please come with me to get the cultivation resources." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, and followed the disciple to the back of the resource room. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also handed their identity medallions to the elder. and the elder recorded their information. Chapter 1812. Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang had already received her own cultivation resources. The disciples' attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang was simply respectful to the point that it couldn't be more respectful. He was polite everywhere, as if Bailey Hongzhuang was not his junior sister, but an elder. In this regard, Bailey Hongzhuang also understood that the other party was polite to her because of her relationship with Bewitching. Now in the entire Tiangang sect, almost no one did not know the relationship between her and Bewitching. Along the way, almost all the cultivators were respectful to her. She felt a little helpless about this situation. After all, she originally did not come to Tiangang sect with such an idea. However, thinking about it carefully, there was nothing bad about this. With this identity, there would be very few cultivators who would dare to find trouble with her, so she could cultivate in peace. During the assessment, there were countless people who found trouble with her, so it was good to be able to have some peace now. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also quickly received their cultivation resources and appeared behind Bailey Hongzhuang. "Boss, we have already received our cultivation resources, let's go back now." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "Let's go out. Xiaoman and the others are still waiting for us outside." When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked out of the resource hall, Dongfang Yu and the other two also walked out. Yuan Xiaoman could not help but walk to Xia Jiqing's side and said with a smile, "Jiqing, let's see if our cultivation resources are the same?" "Okay." Xia Jiqing chuckled and immediately compared herself with Yuan Xiaoman. Through this comparison, the two found that their cultivation resources were exactly the same, and there was no difference. "Sure enough, it's the same." Xia Jiqing sighed, and her eyes fell on Gong Shaoqing. "Shaoqing, what you said is really right." Dong Hongyun could not help but frown. Since everyone will receive the same amount of cultivation resources, then why do we have to separate the different palaces? Isn't this superfluous? If everyone received the same amount of resources, then the resource rooms of the 4 sub-halls could be integrated together. Dongfang Yu and the others looked at each other as doubt surfaced in their eyes. They couldn't understand this either. However, since Tiangang sect made such an arrangement, they must have their reasons. Every branch hall receives different cultivation resources, but because you are all new disciples, the cultivation resources you receive are the same. A low and magnetic voice rang out behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Bewitching's face was filled with a handsome and sunny smile. Seeing the appearance of Bewitching, Xia Jiqing and the others were stunned for a moment. Obviously, they didn't expect that Bewitching would appear at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang was also a little surprised. Bewitching did not tell her that he would be here. What's more, they had only been in the resource hall for a short time. How did Bewitching know that she would be here? Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Bewitching, and her dark eyes were filled with doubt. Bewitching noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's puzzled look and felt helpless. He knew that it was not appropriate for him to accompany Hongzhuang to the Vermilion Bird Hall. What's more, the 4 temple masters had to explain some things to the new disciples. If he was there, it would undoubtedly have some impact. Chapter 1813. Earlier on, he had already told Hongzhuang that she would go to the palace to look for him after she had settled everything. However, he waited in the palace for a long time and did not see Hongzhuang come. Logically speaking, the matter should have been settled by then. Then, he found out that Hongzhuang had come to the resource hall. He happened to have nothing to do in the palace, so he came to the resource hall to look for Hongzhuang. Noticing Bewitching's slightly helpless gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. She thought that Bewitching had not seen her return, so he specially came to look for her. "Greetings, young sect leader." Gong Shaoqing and the others bowed to Bewitching. Before they became disciples of Tiangang sect, Bewitching was their friend. Now they were already members of Tiangang sect. When they saw Bewitching, they naturally had to bow. Bewitching nodded slightly and did not stop them. All the cultivators in Tiangang sect called him that. If he stopped them, it would make things more difficult for them. "Bewitching, you said that the resources received by each branch hall's cultivators are different?" Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. She did not miss this news. Why would the cultivation resources of the 4 branch halls be different? That's right. There has always been competition between the 4 halls. Every year, there will be a competition between the 4 branch halls. The cultivation resources of each branch hall's disciples will be determined based on the results of this competition. Whichever branch hall's results are the best, they will receive the most abundant cultivation resources in the following year. Similarly, whichever branch hall's results are the worst, their disciples will receive the worst cultivation resources in the following year. You are new disciples, so the cultivation resources you receive are the same as other new disciples. After the next competition between the 4 branch palaces, your cultivation resources will be the same as the other disciples of the branch palaces. Bewitching carefully told Bailey Hongzhuang and others about the matter. In Tiangang sect there was competition everywhere. After hearing Bewitching's explanation, everyone had a look of realization. I didn't expect that the cultivation resources of the 4 branch palaces would be different. This is really surprising. Yuan Xiaoman's face was filled with amazement. It seems that in the future, when the 4 sub-palaces compete, we will have to give it our all. After all, this would affect their cultivation resources for the next year. If he was at the bottom of the 4 halls, it would not only be a humiliation, but his cultivation would also be quickly overtaken by others. This was something that no one wanted to see. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with admiration and amazement. The sects from 1,000 years ago did not have so many methods. Now after seeing the scenes of Tiangang sect, she also felt that this method was more mature and had a greater stimulation for the disciples. In such an atmosphere, the disciples would not dare to slack off even if they wanted to. They could only rush forward at full speed. So the next time we meet, we will be competitors? Yuan Jixin's face was filled with a sunny and handsome smile. He really did not think that one day he might become the boss's opponent. Chapter 1814. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone nodded. Although they belonged to different halls, they were all disciples of Tiangang sect. Even if they became opponents in the future, it would just be a mutual exchange of pointers, and there would be no impact. In a few days, there will be other new disciples coming to the sect. They will also compete with you, so you have to work hard. Bewitching's eyes were deep. Now that everyone was here, he naturally hoped that everyone could achieve good results. Don't worry, we will not be defeated by those guys. Bai Junyu's eyes flashed with a firm light. No matter who their future opponents were, they would not back down. Seeing that everyone was very confident, Bewitching was also relieved. It's getting late, we'll go back first. Gong Xiaoqing glanced at the surrounding situation and then said. Their group was standing not far from the door of the resource hall, and all the disciples coming and going were looking at them. What's more, there was also Bewitching standing here. He knew very well that Bewitching would never come here to explain things to them. He must have come to pick up Bailey Hongzhuang. It was extremely inappropriate for them to continue to disturb Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's relationship here. Listening to Gong Xiaoqing's words, everyone nodded. Then let's go back, we'll meet again later. Yuan Jixin smiled. Everyone went to their respective halls. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu's eyes could not help but fall on Bailey Hongzhuang. Where was Hongzhuang going now? At this time, Bewitching said. Junyu Jiqing, you go back to the Vermilion Bird Hall first. As soon as these words came out, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu suddenly understood. Boss, then we'll go back first. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Okay, you go back first. After everyone left, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Bewitching and asked, Did you come here to look for me? If I'm not here to look for you, do you think I'm here to collect cultivation resources from the resource hall? Bewitching's voice was gentle and powerful. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea, were filled with love and tenderness. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and smiled. If you're here to receive cultivation resources, there's nothing strange about that. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was deliberately joking, Bewitching felt helpless. He immediately held Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and walked forward. Suddenly being held by Bewitching, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Many disciples came and went outside the resource hall, and many people saw this scene. Beichen Yu. Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang behind him. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's embarrassed look, he couldn't help but smile. What's wrong with me? Many people are watching. Then let them watch. Sooner or later, you'll be my wife, Beichen's wife. Just let everyone know. Beichen's lips were filled with a confident and dazzling smile. He held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand firmly, not allowing Bailey Hongzhuang to escape. Looking at the domineering appearance of the man in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly raised a smile. She had to say that she was still happy in her heart. Bailey Hongzhuang was led by Beichen all the way to the direction of the palace. She said, Beichen, starting tomorrow, I'll cultivate in the Vermilion Bird Hall. Chapter 18:15. As Bailey Hongzhuang and Beichen got closer and closer to the bedroom, the number of cultivators around also decreased until only the two of them were left. The density of origin energy in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's meditation field is not comparable to the cultivation room in my bedroom. You might as well cultivate here rather than there, Beichen said slowly. Although he and Hongzhuang were together previously, the time they spent together was very short. Now that Hongzhuang finally stayed in Tiangang's sect, if she stayed in Vermilion Bird Palace Hall to cultivate, then wouldn't he not be able to see Hongzhuang often again? This was not a situation he wanted to see. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. The situation is indeed like this, but I'm clearly a disciple of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. If I always stay in your bedroom to cultivate, it would be too inappropriate. What's inappropriate about that? Who dares to say anything? Beichen's tone was domineering and fearless. As the young sect master of Tiangang's sect, who would dare to gossip about him? Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang wrinkled her nose and said, Naturally, no one will say anything in front of others, but there will definitely be many people criticizing behind closed doors. The human heart was the most difficult thing to control. They were unable to control the thoughts of other cultivators. She had originally planned to perform well in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall and reduce some of the voices of criticism. What's there to care about other people's thoughts? After we get married, they will all shut up. Currently, Bailey Hongzhuang was the young sect master's wife in the eyes of Tiangang sect disciples. Although they were not married yet, this was already set in stone. It was because of this that the criticism would be much lesser, and would definitely not be as unbridled as 2 years ago. Hearing Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang did not say much and only quietly stared at Beichen. Feeling Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze, Beichen thought for a moment and said, Why don't you cultivate in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall during the day and come to my bedroom at night? Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang's expression did not change, Beichen continued, This is the bottom line. If you don't agree, I can only look for you. He didn't care what other people thought. After all, Beichen was pestering Bailey Hongzhuang. Besides, I'm going to train in the desert world with you. Beichen's smile was as bright as the sun. No matter what, he couldn't let Hongzhuang stay in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall forever. Seeing that Beichen was determined not to give in, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and nodded. Okay then, I'll come over at night. Just as Beichen had said, they were going to train in the desert world together. Naturally, she couldn't stay in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall forever. There were many disciples meditating in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's meditation area every day. Because the concentration of elemental energy there was stronger than inside the room, almost all the practitioners would choose to stay there. It was naturally inappropriate for her not to go there. If she left at night, it shouldn't be a big deal. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's reply, Beichen finally revealed a satisfied smile. His slender finger scratched Bailey Hongzhuang's nose and said, That's my good wife. Bailey Hongzhuang glared at Beichen. She was now completely at her wits' end with Beichen. The next day before dawn, Bailey Hongzhuang had already returned to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Chapter 18:16. After the three beasts came out of the desert world, they rested in the cultivation room. They were also exhausted. Because Beichen was cultivating with them in the desert world, they went deeper into the desert unscrupulously. As a result, the strength of the monsters that appeared was also more and more powerful. With Bewitching's strength, it was naturally no problem to deal with these monsters. But Bailey Hongzhuang and the three beasts felt a huge pressure. With the idea of improving their own strength, they would never ask Bewitching for help unless they couldn't hold on anymore. As a result, every battle could be said to be exhausted, and even walking on the edge of death. Although this method was extremely tiring, the speed of improvement was also very fast. Therefore, they still enjoyed this kind of cultivation and never got tired of it. If you want to improve your cultivation, you often have to grow in abuse. Bailey Hongzhuang returned to her room. After many times of cultivation in the desert world, her endurance was also constantly improving. She still remembered the first time she came out of the desert world. She was exhausted. Now the monsters she encountered in the desert world were getting stronger and stronger. But she was not as tired as before. She could clearly feel her progress. And in the long run, she felt that the improvement would be more obvious. After freshening up in the room for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the room. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also came out at this moment. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang, both of them smiled. "Boss, you also got up." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. "Yes, let's go to the martial arts field together." Xia Jiqing had some doubts in her heart. Since the boss and the young sect master left together yesterday, she had not seen the boss. She didn't know when the boss came back. However, Xia Jiqing did not think much in this regard. The boss and the young sect master were originally husband and wife, and now living together was a matter of course. "I really want to see what the martial arts field looks like." Xia Jiqing's eyes flashed with excitement. Everything in Tiangang Zone could give people a sense of shock. The martial training field was undoubtedly the place where the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples often gathered. She would be able to see many of her senior brothers and sisters there. She also wanted to see them. "Then let's go." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two immediately headed towards the martial arts field. They had never been to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's martial arts field. But there was a map in the Qianquan bag that the resource elder had given them. The map clearly indicated the distribution of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Therefore, they also knew where the martial arts training field was. As Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked towards the martial arts field, they realized that the number of disciples around them was gradually increasing. Clearly, these disciples were heading to the martial arts field like them. Currently, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's new disciples were only the three of them. So the cultivators who appeared beside them were all senior brothers and sisters who had arrived earlier. The eyes of many disciples fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. If it was a normal day, when a new disciple came, they would definitely come up to communicate with them. However, because of Bailey Hongzhuang's special identity, they did not dare to come forward and disturb her. If they caused Bailey Hongzhuang to be unhappy, then they would really have to bear the consequences. Chapter 1817. For Bailey Hongzhuang, she had never been a person who cared about her identity. As long as she treated people with sincerity, they were her friends. However, she had just arrived at the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, and many people did not know her character. Naturally, they would not disturb her. If it was her, she would have the same idea. With the surrounding disciples leading the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two did not need to worry about not being able to find the place. As long as they followed everyone, they would be able to reach it. The martial arts field and the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall itself were not on the same mountain peak, but on a mountain peak next to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. The whole mountain peak was raised to the ground from the top, as if there was a huge axe that cut the mountain in half, smooth and flat. A large and amazing martial arts field appeared. The open-air martial arts field was spectacular and huge. At a glance, one could see a group of disciples sitting on a futon and meditating. In a place further away, there was an empty training field with an arena in it. Seeing this scene, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. As early as yesterday, they had already felt that Tiangang sect's style was amazing, but when they saw this martial arts field, it was even more than before. Such a large martial arts field, It was really the first time they had seen it. The feeling of having so many cultivators meditating and cultivating at the same time was completely different. Oh my god, this is too shocking. Xia Jiqing couldn't help but sigh. After coming to Tiangang's sect, she really felt that she had seen the world. She suddenly felt that 2 years ago, the disciples of Tiangang's sect ridiculed them for not seeing the world. Perhaps it was somewhat reasonable, because before their eyes had always been confined to a small range. When they participated in the assessment competition, they had already broadened their horizons, but now after seeing the various arrangements of Tiangang's sect, their horizons were even wider. So many cultivators meditating together. I always feel that it is a very interesting thing. Bai Junyu's face was filled with a handsome and warm smile. On ordinary days, they would stay in their own houses to cultivate. There had never been so many people in the same place to cultivate. Therefore, he had a very novel feeling. Mutual supervision and encouragement is indeed very interesting. Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face was filled with appreciation. She sighed inwardly. 1,000 years later, the way the sect trained its disciples was indeed much better than 1,000 years ago. Let's go over quickly, we will cultivate here today. Xia Jiqing smiled. Looking at Xia Jiqing's excited face, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bai Junyu looked at each other, and both of them smiled. Soon Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two entered the practice area. The moment Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked in, they could feel that the concentration of elemental energy here was roughly 2.5 times that of the outside world. The concentration of elemental energy in other parts of Tiangang sect was equal to twice that of the outside world. Although it was only a 50% increase, it was already very good. If he cultivated here for a long time, his cultivation speed would be much faster than in the outside world. In the middle of the entire training field, there was a pitch-black pillar. The name, cultivation level, and ranking of every cultivator was clearly recorded on the pillar. Chapter 1818. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two couldn't help but take a few steps closer along the passage, wanting to see their rankings. After all, they had to first understand their current level of strength in Tiangang sect. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked to the front of the ranking pillar, they looked for their names below. Soon Bailey Hongzhuang found where her name was. Rank 581, Yellow Realm 7th level. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu's rankings appeared in the 800th place, which was the real bottom. Seeing this scene, Xia Jiqing couldn't help but sigh. It seems that my judgment is really not wrong. I really am at the bottom. Although she had already expected such a result, she still couldn't help but have some expectations in her heart. She only hoped that her results were not so bad. However, the final result clearly told her that this was the truth, and it was useless to have any wishful thinking. Fortunately, the number of cultivators with the same cultivation is not small. As long as you break through one level, your ranking can be improved a lot. Bai Junyu smiled and comforted Xia Jiqing after seeing the frustrated look on her face. Such an outcome was within their expectations. After all, the other cultivators had been cultivating in Tiangang sect for a while, and their cultivation was naturally much stronger than theirs. When the next time they recruited disciples, their strength would also be much stronger than the later cultivators. Listening to Bai Junyu's words, Xia Jiqing nodded and could only comfort herself like this. Such a result was really a bit shameful. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes stopped at the words Yellow Realm 7th level. Her current strength was no longer Yellow Realm 7th level. Since the end of the assessment, she had been working hard to cultivate and had not stopped. What's more, she and Beichen had been cultivating in the desert world during this time. With Beichen, Bailey Hongzhuang could also meditate in the desert world, but she needed someone to pay attention to the movements around her. At night, they went into the desert world and cultivated in the desert world for 3 days. When the 3 days were up, they came out during the day, so they had a good rest. When night fell, they once again entered the desert world. Under such circumstances, her improvement speed was very fast. What's more, her grandfather treated her exceptionally well after reuniting with her. He gave her a lot of cultivation resources. With these cultivation resources, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately used them. For the current her, the most important thing was to increase her own strength. Everything else was inconsequential. Under such circumstances, the speed of her and Bewitching's improvement was obvious. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was wondering about this cultivation, a man walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. The man was wearing a green robe. He was about 25 years old and had a dignified appearance. He was polite and refined. Junior sister Bailey, junior sister Xia, junior brother Bai. I am the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's eldest senior brother. My name is Gui Jinyuan. Gui Jinyuan's face was filled with a friendly and polite smile, making people unable to feel the slightest bit of vigilance and disgust. The ranking pillar is a record of your cultivation at the end of the assessment. Now that 3 months have passed, the ranking is no longer accurate. Chapter 18-19. Gui Jinyuan's determined and calm face had a faint smile as he carefully introduced the ranking pillar to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang revealed a look of realization. Previously, she felt that the cultivation level recorded on the ranking pillar was not accurate. It turned out that she had to re-examine it. Gui Jinyuan nodded. Not bad, the ranking pillar's test is very accurate. Even for cultivators of the same cultivation level, the ranking pillar can still determine the ranking based on their origin power level. It's extremely accurate. As soon as he said this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's eyes were filled with astonishment. They thought that cultivators of the same cultivation level would be ranked the same. They did not expect the ranking pillar to be so accurate. It was truly shocking. Thank you for telling me, eldest senior brother. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly bowed as a faint and charming smile appeared on her charming face. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang bowing to him, Gui Jianyuan hurriedly said, I don't dare. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. Senior brother Gui is my senior brother. It's only right for me to bow. Why would I not dare? Although it was her first time meeting Gui Jianyuan, Bailey Hongzhuang had a very good impression of him. This Gui Jianyuan spoke elegantly and had a very good attitude. It was no wonder that he could become the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's eldest senior brother. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Gui Jianyuan was slightly stunned. After noticing that Bailey Hongzhuang's words came from her heart, his gaze changed a little. As the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's eldest senior brother, he had the obligation to tell all the new disciples about everything here when they came here. After such a long time, he had long been used to it. In his opinion, being able to have the opportunity to help the new junior brothers and sisters was an extremely good thing. Perhaps it was because of his personality that he had always been very popular in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. He knew the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, the future wife of the young master of Tiangang sect, who didn't know this identity. He had never come into contact with Bailey Hongzhuang. He only thought that Bailey Hongzhuang should be as high and mighty as Han Xiling. However, at this moment, looking at this approachable and beautiful woman in front of him, he really found it hard to believe that she was Bailey Hongzhuang. There was undoubtedly a huge difference from what he had imagined. However, such a Bailey Hongzhuang made it easier for people to have a good impression of her. Junior sister Bailey, you can infuse your essence energy at the bottom of the ranking pillar to determine your ranking. Here, many cultivators will come here every time they make a breakthrough in their cultivation to see how far their ranking has risen, Gui Jianyuan said with a smile. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two nodded. Come to think of it, every disciple hoped that their ranking would rise quickly. Therefore, every time there was a little bit of progress, everyone would come here to test it. Eldest senior brother, thank you. Xia Jiqing thanked him. Gui Jianyuan waved his hand. As the eldest senior brother, telling you these is my duty. In the future, if there is anything you don't understand, or if you need help, just come to me. As long as I can help, I will not refuse. My room number is 1. Looking at such a calm and generous Gui Jianyuan, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had a good impression of him. At least, after knowing Gui Jianyuan, they would be able to consult him if they didn't understand anything in the future. Chapter 1820. Gui Jinyuan's face was filled with a warm smile. After indicating that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others did not need to thank him, he returned to the futon and continued to meditate and cultivate. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's eyes fell on the ranking pillar. They also had to reconfirm their ranking. Xia Jiqing was the first to go to the testing place. Her body's power surged out. Her right hand covered the bottom of the ranking pillar, and her power quickly poured into it. Then, a subtle light bloomed, and Xia Jiqing retracted her right hand. However, although Xia Jiqing rechecked, the ranking still did not change at all. Seeing this, Xia Jiqing sighed discouragingly. I'm really the last one. Although she already knew that she was the last one, after hearing Gui Jinyuan's introduction, she couldn't help but have some hope in her heart. Unexpectedly, the final result was exactly the same as before. There was no change. Looking at Xia Jiqing's appearance, Bai Junyu patted Xia Jiqing's shoulder and said, Your ranking will rise soon, don't worry. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing nodded slightly, but there was still a bit of helplessness in her expression. Since Jiqing's ranking has not changed, there should not be any difference in my ranking. It's better to wait until I break through, and then test again. Bai Junyu said slowly. In the 3 months of relaxation, they spent most of their time resting and visiting relatives and friends. Their cultivation base did not make much progress. Therefore, there was no need to test at all. Xia Jiqing then looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, Boss, do you want to test? She always felt that the strength of the boss was a bit stronger than when they were separated. But it was just her feeling, and she couldn't judge. In terms of cultivation, the boss had always been extremely diligent. She had been with the boss for so long, and she had never seen the boss slack off in cultivation. Thinking about it, the boss should not have neglected her cultivation during the time she was in Tiangang sect. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, her beautiful face shining with a bright smile. With her current strength, she was also at the lower level among the disciples of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. However, she believed that it would not be long before her ranking would rise all the way. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's right hand also covered the bottom of the ranking stone, as the yuan power in her body quickly surged out. Following the emergence of this elemental energy, a faint but sparkling green light quietly appeared. Looking at this green light, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu's eyes were filled with surprise. Why was Bailey Hongzhuang's test different from Xia Jiqing's test? Then, they noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang's ranking kept moving up, and finally stopped at the 300th place. Bailey Hongzhuang 300th place, Green Realm Level 1. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu's eyes were fixed on the words Green Territory, and their eyes couldn't help but be filled with a strong sense of amazement. Green Territory? Xia Jiqing's eyes widened, and her pretty face was full of disbelief. Boss, you actually broke through to the Green Realm? Bai Junyu also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in a daze. This improvement was a little too shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. I just broke through a few days ago. Boss, isn't your breakthrough speed a little too abnormal? It's such a blow to us. Chapter 1821. Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation speed had always been very fast. It was not only because her talent was strong enough, but also because of her hard work. Few people could compare to her. However, it had only been 3 months since the end of the assessment competition. Usually, people would take a good rest in these 3 months. After all, the days before were too hard. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not seem to feel tired at all. No matter what the situation was, she never stopped cultivating. It was fine if she did not stop, but now that she had reached the first level of the Green Realm, she had completely left them behind. Hongzhuang, did you spend all your time on cultivation? Bai Junyu's expression was gloomy. He suddenly felt that he did not need so much supervision from Tiangang sect. As long as he was with Bailey Hongzhuang, there was no possibility of them slacking off. Thinking back to when they were in Azure Water School, their cultivation was about the same, but now Bailey Hongzhuang was much stronger than him. However, during this period of time, they had come together. It really made people sigh with emotion. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and nodded. More or less. Basically, I'm cultivating. She still had too many things to do. It would not do if she did not cultivate properly. Although the speed of her cultivation was already very fast, it was far from enough for her. She wanted to defeat Lan Qingyan. Lan Qingyan was older than her by a few years. Based on Bewitching and Xiren's cultivation, Lan Qingyan should have reached the Green Realm. However, she had just broken through to the Green Realm. The gap between them was still very big. If she wanted to defeat Lan Qingyan fair and square, she had to put in more effort. All these years, Lan Qingyan had obtained her rainbow pearl and was still proud of herself in the Lan family. She thought that she was talented and was born to be a great person. Lan Qingyan even belittled and ridiculed her. In Lan Qingyan's words, Lan Yixuan was destined to die young. Who asked her parents to not take care of her? She deserved it. Only she was the true successor of the Lan family. After knowing the words that Lan Qingyan had once said, she decided that she must defeat Lan Qingyan in front of everyone. Not only for her, but also for her parents. She wanted to let everyone know that things that didn't belong to them, didn't belong to them. Even if Lan Qingyan had snatched away what belonged to her, she could still crush Lan Qingyan. It was precisely because of this that she was exceptionally diligent in her cultivation. She had no time to waste. After hearing the words of Bailey Hongzhuang, Xia Jiqing couldn't help but be speechless. Boss, you've been separated from young sect master for such a long time, and it's not easy for you to have a chance to get along. You actually spent all your time on cultivation? Aren't you a little too unromantic? Xia Jiqing had always thought that during this period of time, the boss and the young lord were together. They must be inseparable. But now, she realized that the situation was not like that at all. Bai Junyu didn't know what to say at this moment. He only felt that Hongzhuang didn't seem to need to rest at all. Bailey Hongzhuang, he was afraid that she was born to be a character. After all, even if many cultivators worked hard, they couldn't reach the level of Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 1822. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged and said with a smile, Beichen won't care. She also wanted to travel with Beichen and have a good rest for a while. However, in this situation it was obviously not easy to rest. Beichen would also understand her. For Beichen, she had always felt a little guilty. Beichen was too tolerant of her. No matter what, he always supported her as always. If there was no Beichen's support, she would have had a harder time now. Fortunately, the lifespan of a cultivator was very long. As long as she rescued her parents and got her revenge, she could live with Beichen in peace. She believed that Beichen also thought so. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's natural look, Xia Jiqing was helpless. Boss, the young sect master really spoils you. You have to cherish it. If it was an ordinary man, I'm afraid that he wouldn't be able to stand the boss, putting all her energy into cultivation. Xia Jiqing only felt that since she saw the young sect master, she felt that this was the real appearance of a good man. No matter what the boss did, the young sect master would always support her without any complaints. Just this point alone was already extremely difficult. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. I understand. She would cherish Beichen, because he was the person who would walk hand in hand with her for the rest of her life. Speaking of which, boss, isn't your cultivation speed a little too heaven-defying? Before, you were at Orange Realm 7th level. In just 3 months, your cultivation has increased by a full 3 levels. If this news is spread out, I'm afraid everyone will be shocked, right? Xia Jiqing was incredulous. She really didn't understand how the boss cultivated. This kind of cultivation speed would scare a lot of people to death. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly and did not answer Xia Jiqing's question. Although on the surface it seemed that she had only cultivated for a little more than 2 months. In addition to the time in the desert world, she had already cultivated for more than half a year. Moreover, with an abundance of cultivation resources, her speed of improvement was naturally extremely fast. We have to work hard. Otherwise, we don't know where Hongzhuang will leave us in the dust. Bai Junyu faintly sighed, his expression revealing a bit of amusement. If Gong Shaoqing and the others knew about the speed at which Bailey Hongzhuang had been plotting, their expressions would not be any better than theirs. Xia Jiqing nodded, looking serious and firm. Yes, we must work hard. She wanted to be boss's right-hand man, but with her current cultivation, she couldn't help at all, let alone be his right-hand man. Boss, you're already in the 300th place. You're definitely a powerful existence among the new disciples. I believe that even if those cultivators from aristocratic families were to come here, they would definitely be no match for you. Xia Jiqing's eyes flashed with excitement. Although her own strength was destined to be at the bottom, the boss's strength was very strong. She hadn't seen the other new disciples yet, but there was a certain competition between the new disciples. As long as the boss's ranking was high enough, then they would have the confidence. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. It's not clear yet. We will only know when the other new disciples arrive. Chapter 1823. Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely the most popular person in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Therefore, after Bailey Hongzhuang re-evaluated her ability, most of the cultivators had their eyes on the pillar. They wanted to know how Bailey Hongzhuang's results were. After all, the news that Bailey Hongzhuang was at Yellow Realm level 7 was just a rumor. None of them knew her real cultivation level. As a new disciple, Yellow Realm level 7 was not bad. However, as the champion of the assessment competition, everyone was still doubtful. However, when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's ranking quickly rise and finally stop at the 300th place, the eyes of the disciples were filled with surprise. Green Realm level 1? Bailey Hongzhuang has already reached the first level of the Green Realm? Wasn't she just Yellow Realm level 7 previously? It's only been 3 months. How could Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly reach Green Realm level 1? Could it be that the news from last time wasn't accurate enough? Green Realm level 1. With such ability, she can be ranked in the middle in the entire Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang's ability is not simple. I saw that she was getting along well with eldest senior brother just now. She seems to be much better than Han Xiling. That's not necessarily true. Who doesn't know eldest senior brother's character? No matter how bad the other party is, eldest senior brother will treat them with respect. Everyone was discussing. They had to admit that Bailey Hongzhuang's Green Realm level 1 cultivation level made them speechless. At such a young age, and with such a cultivation level, she was outstanding in both ability and talent. Compared to Han Xiling, they felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's ability was more outstanding. If Han Xiling was still alive, he would not be Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent. The disciples who originally wanted to use this incident to mock her were now silent. They felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master were becoming more and more compatible. No one could find fault with them. Boss, let's find a place to cultivate first. Xia Jiqing couldn't help but say after seeing the eyes of the disciples stop on them. After all the disciples were cultivating in the direction of the ranking pillar. The place where they were standing was undoubtedly where everyone was paying attention. As a result, it was a bit awkward. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and smiled. Okay, let's go together. The 3 people quickly walked to the back. The front seats were already filled with disciples. They just needed to find an empty seat to sit and cultivate. Casually finding 3 adjacent empty seats, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others sat down. Xia Jiqing smiled. Jiqing's is Realm level 1's cultivation level, Jiqing Yin Zhuang's Jiqing S. Jiqing's is Jiqing Realm level Realm. Jiqing Realm's Hongzwing Realm cultivation level cultivation Hongzwing Realm. The concentration of spirit energy in the small world was also equivalent to 2 times that of the outside world. She didn't expect that the concentration of spirit energy here would reach 2.5 times. The thing that left the deepest impression on her was the stairway to heaven that she encountered in the ruins. Cultivating in that kind of place where origin energy was dense, the speed of cultivation was simply shocking. Now she really missed the heaven stairway. If she could cultivate on the heaven stairway for a while, her cultivation would break through again. Chapter 1824. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 immediately began to cultivate on the field. After entering the state of cultivation, the whole field was quiet. In addition to the subtle sound of breathing, there were few other sounds. Bailey Hongzhuang happened to be in the desert world for 3 days at night. Before leaving the desert world, she also experienced a battle. She returned to the house and did not rest much before coming out. At this moment, meditating was also a kind of rest for her. Bailey Hongzhuang meditated for a whole day. The surrounding disciples came and went, but there were many disciples like Bailey Hongzhuang who stayed for a whole day. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang working so hard, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu did not have any reason to slack off. They immediately immersed themselves in cultivation. If they wanted to catch up with Bailey Hongzhuang, there was basically no hope. However, at least they had to find a way to improve their ranking. This feeling of being at the bottom was very uncomfortable. They just wanted to improve their cultivation as soon as possible. Until the sky turned dark, Bailey Hongzhuang exited the state of cultivation. After such a long time of cultivation during the day, the yuan power in her body that had been exhausted had been completely replenished, and her energy had also been restored to its previous state. Now she found that her body's recovery speed was getting faster and faster. Whether it was yuan power or spirit, it was much faster than before. Although she had exercised her body in her previous life, she had never cultivated at such a high intensity. In fact, except for the existence of the Chaos Ring, there were very few such opportunities on ordinary days. And now, she gradually discovered the changes in herself during the process of cultivation. Bailey Hongzhuang stood up, but saw that Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were still cultivating, and did not have the slightest intention to stop. Junyu Jiqing, I'm going back, what about you? Bailey Hongzhuang lowered her voice and asked. The whole field was unusually quiet. If the voice was too loud, it would undoubtedly disturb other cultivators. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also exited their cultivation state. Xia Jiqing thought for a moment and said, Boss, you go back first. I want to continue cultivating here. In the past 3 months, she had been too lazy. She couldn't continue to be lazy like this. Moreover, when she thought about how she was in the last place, she couldn't wait to throw away this title. This was simply too embarrassing. Good. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. It was a good thing that Xia Jiqing wanted to cultivate. Junyu, what about you? Bai Junyu looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, then looked at Xia Jiqing and said, I will also stay here to cultivate. Bailey Hongzhuang looked between Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu. After she left, she wanted to give Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu some opportunities to be alone. This was undoubtedly excellent. Then I will go first, you guys can do it. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Bewitching was still waiting for her to go back. If she didn't go back, she was afraid that Bewitching would come to find her again. After Bailey Hongzhuang left the Vermilion Bird Hall, she quickly went in the direction of Bewitching's palace. Chapter 1825. Before Bailey Hongzhuang arrived at Bewitching's sleeping quarters, the 3 beasts had been eagerly waiting for their master's return. After coming out from the desert world today, they were simply too tired and fell into a deep sleep. When they woke up, the sky was already dark and their stomachs were rumbling. Bewitching had already prepared dinner and was only waiting for their master to return. However, after waiting for a long time, they still had not seen their master's figure and were simply too anxious. It would have been fine if there was nothing to eat. However, the food was so close to them, and they could even smell its alluring aroma. However, since their master had not returned, they naturally could not eat. This feeling was simply too torturous. Bewitching was also standing outside the room. His extraordinarily handsome face was filled with confusion. They had already agreed to come over at night before Hongzhuang had left. Why had they not seen Hongzhuang's figure yet? Could it be that something unexpected had happened? After thinking of this possibility, Bewitching felt that it was impossible. Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely be fine in the Tiangang sect. Why isn't Master back yet? I'm about to starve to death. Xiaohei rubbed its stomach. It felt as if it was going to faint from hunger at any moment. She should be back soon. Don't talk about being hungry. The more you talk, the hungrier you get. Xiaobai sighed. Changing the topic was not so bad. If they focused on eating, they would only get hungrier the more they thought about it. Baisher looked at Xiaohei and Xiaobai, who had shriveled up into balls, with a helpless expression. Isn't Master just a little late? You're already so hungry. As Baisher spoke, Xiao He and Xiao Bai glared at Baisher resentfully. You've already eaten the demon crystal. It's easy for you to say that. If you have the ability, don't eat the demon crystal. Baisher twisted its round body. It's your fault for not being able to eat it. You can't blame me for this. Xiao He and Xiao Bai glared angrily at Baisher. They were not as perverted as Baisher, who could break through by eating demon crystals. Oh right, Baisher. I think I saw you eating the demon crystals of the desert world. Xiao Bai narrowed its eyes at Baisher. Its master had already told Baisher about this long ago. It was best for Baisher not to eat the demon crystals of the desert world's demonic beasts, before it could confirm if there was anything wrong with them. However, when it was in a daze and before it fully awakened, it had clearly seen Baisher and red demon crystals. Baisher could not help but be stunned when he heard this. He hurriedly said, Nonsense, I don't have it. However, Baisher felt guilty. Calm? It had already eaten a lot of ordinary demon crystals. It only felt that the demon crystals of the demon beasts in the desert world tasted better. But Xiao Zhao's Baisher. Therefore, when Xiao Bai was not around, Xiao Bai secretly ate a few. Xiao Bai felt that eating demon crystals did not have much of an effect. Its strength was still improving. It was just demon crystals. Xiao He and Xiao Bai looked at Baisher. They felt that Baisher's expression was not right. Just as Xiao He and Xiao Bai were thinking, Baisher's voice suddenly rang out. Look, Master is back. Xiao He and Xiao Bai turned their heads almost immediately after hearing Baisher's words. Chapter 1826. After Bewitching saw Bailey Hongzhuang appear, his beautiful face was filled with a smile. Now Bailey Hongzhuang had changed into the Tiangang sect's disciple uniform. Obviously, everyone was wearing the same disciple uniform, but when Bailey Hongzhuang wore it, it gave off a different feeling. She was born to be a different person. No matter what she did or what she wore, she could give people a different feeling. Wearing the same clothes, Bailey Hongzhuang was always the most eye-catching thing. Bewitching could not help but rejoice that he had captured Bailey Hongzhuang's heart early on. Otherwise, with Bailey Hongzhuang's outstanding appearance, she must have attracted countless wild bees and butterflies in the sect. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang appear, the three beasties quickly greeted her and jumped in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Master, you're finally back. Baisher could not hide the excitement on his face. Ever since they came to Tiangang sect, they had not been by their master's side all the time. On one hand, it was because their master was running around, and it did not matter whether they went or not. On the other hand, they also wanted to give their master and Bewitching some time to be alone together. Otherwise, it would be inconvenient for their master and Bewitching to get along with each other, if she always brought the three of them. Master, I missed you so much. Xiao He jumped on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder and intimately rubbed against Bailey Hongzhuang's face. Xiao Bai also jumped on Bailey Hongzhuang's other shoulder. Master, come back earlier next time. Looking at the three beasties suddenly being so intimate, Bailey Hongzhuang felt happy and puzzled at the same time. This was not in line with the three beasties' style. Previously, when they followed He Mu, they also did not see her for a period of time. At that time, she did not see the three beasties miss her so much. Wife, you're back. Bewitching's handsome face was full of smiles as he slowly walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Hearing Bewitching's words, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. It felt really good to know that someone was waiting for his return. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I said I would come. Why are you still waiting for me outside? Although the distance from the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall to here wasn't short, with her speed, it wouldn't take long. Everyone was tired when we came out of the desert world. I'll wait for you to come back so we can eat together. Bewitching held Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and walked into the house. When a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, they didn't need to eat on time like ordinary people. It was very casual. With Bewitching's words, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. No wonder you're so enthusiastic. So it's because you want to eat. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes and smiled at the three beasties. She knew that there must be some other reason, why these three fellows suddenly missed her so much. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had discovered their thoughts, the three beasties couldn't help but shrink their heads. They smiled brightly and said, "Master, we're telling the truth. We really miss you. A day without seeing you feels like 3 years." However, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't believe the three beasties' words at all. She understood these three beasties very well. Everything else was fake. The only real thing was that they wanted to eat. However, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't mind. Who asked her to raise 3 gluttonous contract beasties? Chapter 1827. The dinner Bewitching prepared was very sumptuous. Just like the nutritious dinner he prepared for Bailey Hongzhuang in the blood-ground abyss. Now that you have to run around and cultivate, you naturally need to nourish your body. Bewitching served Bailey Hongzhuang a bowl of demonic beast bone soup. This kind of nourishment could also strengthen Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Bailey Hongzhuang took it with a smile. This feeling reminds me of the time in the blood-ground abyss. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 years have passed. Bewitching chuckled. You're a busy person. Naturally, time passes unknowingly. But for me, wife, 1 day without seeing you is like 3 years. So I feel that these 2 years have been exceptionally long. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly startled. She stared at Bewitching's serious and joking face, and a complicated light flashed in her eyes. Speaking of which, during the time she was with Bewitching, she was almost always busy doing things. On the contrary, it was Bewitching who dropped all kinds of things to accompany her. After hearing Bewitching's ambiguous and straightforward words, the three beasts couldn't help but narrow their eyes. TSK, not suitable for children. TSK, not suitable for demonic beasts. TSK, not suitable. The three beasts helplessly shook their heads. They knew that they were like third wheels here. Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes couldn't help but fall on the three beasts. These three guys were really good at ruining the atmosphere. Bewitching's indifferent gaze swept over the three beasts indifferently. I think you're already full, right? As soon as these words came out, the three beasts' expressions all changed, and then they all smiled. No, we didn't say anything. Eat. The three beasts lowered their heads together, pretending that nothing had happened, and continued to eat dinner. What a joke. They hadn't eaten their fill yet, so how could they leave just like that? Now, they could only count on Bewitching for their meals. They absolutely could not count on Bewitching. Otherwise, they would have nothing to eat in the future. Seeing how obedient the three beasts were, Bewitching nodded in satisfaction. Good girl. Seeing the smug look on Bewitching's face, Bailey Hongzhuang secretly scolded him. Bewitching had clearly grasped the weaknesses of the three beasts. Now they could only obediently submit to Bewitching. Why didn't she realize that Bewitching was so two-faced in the past? Bailey Hongzhuang thought. However, she had already boarded the pirate ship. She could only continue like this. Bewitching, recently, as I've been training in the desert world for a longer period of time, I've realized that after leaving the desert world, the recovery speed of my energy and elemental energy has increased by a lot. Compared to the exhaustion after going in and coming out, it's obviously much better now. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Hearing this, Bewitching nodded. Your body's adaptability is constantly improving, so your recovery speed is also constantly increasing. In the past, I heard from the sect leader that when a practitioner is in a training environment for a long period of time, his physical fitness will constantly improve. Your first recovery was very slow, but your 100th recovery speed is much faster than the first time. Chapter 1828. Bewitching's eyes were overflowing with joy. Hongzhuang's chaos ring was really magical. This desert world was undoubtedly an excellent place for them to cultivate. They could save a lot of time cultivating there. Previously, when Hongzhuang was participating in the assessment competition, he was worried that it would be too difficult for Hongzhuang to catch up with Lan Qingyin's cultivation. This was because Lan Qingyin started cultivating when she was 5 years old, but Hongzhuang only started cultivating when she was 14 years old. There was a gap of 9 years between the two of them. Even though Hong Zhuang's cultivation talent was outstanding, Lan Qingyan's cultivation talent was not bad either. He did not doubt that if Hong Zhuang and Hong Zhuang had cultivated at the same age, then it would not be a problem for Hong Zhuang to defeat Lan Qingyan. However, there was a gap of 9 years, and it was too difficult to cross this gap. Now with this desert world, everything that was impossible had become possible. Hearing Di Beichun's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes brightened. If everything was really as Di Beichun said, then in the long run, it would be very beneficial to them. That's great. We have to go to the desert world to cultivate more. This way, we can also speed up our recovery. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Di Beichun nodded slightly. That's right. Beichun, do you know what kind of place the desert world is? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows wrinkled slightly. This was something she couldn't understand. Could it be that it's a pocket dimension created by the Chaos Ring? After seeing the pocket dimension of the assessment competition, she was full of amazement towards it. Perhaps, it was a pocket dimension created by the Chaos Ring. Hearing this, Di Beichun's eyes were also filled with a hint of contemplation. He had been to the desert world many times, but he still did not have a definite answer. I can't tell if it's a pocket dimension, because the monsters there are different from the monsters we usually see. Di Beichun frowned slightly. He had never heard of such monsters, until he saw them in the pocket dimension. Then everything was real and not fake. Even if the desert world was a pocket dimension, how did these monsters appear? This was simply inexplicable. It was because of this that he could not tell. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Indeed, I have never seen the monsters there. Their demon crystals are also different. I have never heard of the existence of these monsters, so I can't tell at once. It would be better if I go to the library tomorrow and look around. Maybe I can find some relevant information by looking through the history books. Di Beichun said. He knew that all this time, Bailey Hongzhuang did not know much about the situation in the Chaos Ring, because all of this was obviously arranged by the Chaos Ring, but it was something that they could not have predicted. They obviously did not know the origin of the Chaos Ring, but the desert world was simply too special. He did not believe that it was created by the previous owner of the Chaos Ring. Therefore, there should be some relevant information. There are a lot of books in Tiangang sect, and many historical things are recorded. However, since Hong Zhuang did not know, it was probably something that happened thousands of years ago. Chapter 1829. Listening to Di Beichun's words, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. At present, this was the only way. Hopefully, they would be able to find information related to the desert world. The Chaos Ring was too magical, and there were too many things they did not understand. Therefore, they could only try to understand it bit by bit. Wifey, you went to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall to meditate today. How did it feel? Di Beichun smiled at Bailey Hongzhuang, his eyes filled with concern and affection. Bailey Hongzhuang thought about the situation in the meditating field, then smiled and said, It's pretty good. Everyone is working hard to cultivate. After seeing how hard everyone is cultivating, Jiqing and Junyu have not left the meditating field until now. Di Beichun nodded, his expression relaxed. The atmosphere of the meditating field can easily make cultivators work hard. If others don't leave, they won't leave either. It's because of this that the disciples' strength has improved a lot. This is really a good method. The disciples are all young and energetic. When they cultivate together, it's easy for them to compete with each other. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. One is marked by the company one keeps. When a lazy cultivator saw that all the cultivators around him were working exceptionally hard, he could not continue to be lazy. This was because he would feel a sense of anxiety in his heart. He was afraid that he would be left behind by everyone. Come to think of it, this was the most important reason for the existence of the meditating field. It seems that Jiqing and Junyu's speed of improvement should be very fast. Di Beichun chuckled. In my opinion, many people need to meditate, but only you don't. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at Di Beichun with slight surprise. Why do you say that? Everyone doesn't have enough motivation to cultivate on their own, so sitting in meditation is a great motivator for them. However, wife's daily efforts are already very astonishing. Whether or not you have a seat, it clearly doesn't have any effect on you. Bewitching sighed. He was speechless at Bailey Hongzhuang's effort. It was likely that many heirs of powerful forces were not as hardworking as Hongzhuang. It was as if she didn't feel tired at all, or perhaps the word tired was simply not within her scope of consideration. She had put all her effort into cultivation, but she did not feel the slightest bit of hardship. However, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Bewitching could not help but feel distressed. At the same time, he also understood how important it was to rescue Hongzhuang's parents. Hongzhuang was doing her best to improve her strength, so he only wanted to take good care of Hongzhuang in other aspects. At the very least, he had to keep up with the nutrition. Finding out where Yu Siqing had hidden Lan Yunxiao and his wife wasn't an easy task. Shirtian Pavilion had already accepted this person for some time, but until now, they had not received any news. This was also within his expectations. After all, if it was really so easy to find out, he wouldn't have been searching for so long without any results. Now, they could only hope that Shirtian Pavilion would spend more time to find out the location. Bailey Hongzhuang obviously knew this, but she had never said it out loud. Once she said it, she felt that there would be less hope. Chapter 1830. After dinner, Bewitching, Bailey Hongzhuang, and the three beasties rested for a while before entering the desert world again. Now that they were more and more accustomed to the desert world, they were no longer as panicked and worried as before. As the demonic beast's strength increased, so did Bailey Hongzhuang's battle prowess. Originally, Bewitching was very puzzled as to why Bailey Hongzhuang was able to grasp so many powerful martial techniques. But ever since he found out about Bailey Hongzhuang's true identity, he no longer had any doubts. He even felt that the martial techniques from 1,000 years ago were extremely powerful. Unfortunately, many of them had disappeared in the long river of history. However, in the following years, there were people who created extremely powerful martial techniques. While Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching were raising their cultivation in the desert world, Mo Yunjue was in a very bad mood. Why haven't we gotten any results after so long? Mo Yunjue frowned, his gloomy and cold eyes locked on the subordinate in front of him. It had been more than 2 months since he accepted this mission, but there was still no news. This was simply intolerable. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang, who was currently in Tiangang's sect, must be anxiously waiting for this news. Those were Bailey Hongzhuang's parents. After being separated for so many years, he finally had the chance to rescue them. However, he had sent people to investigate for so long, but still couldn't confirm the final result. It was truly infuriating. Ever since the assessment competition ended, he had no more chances to see Hongzhuang. Now there was only one thing, but he couldn't get any results. Hearing Mo Yunjue's furious voice, the man knelt in front of Mo Yunjue with his head lowered, his face filled with guilt. Young master, that Yu Siqing was truly too secretive. We investigated for a long time, and confirmed that Lan Yunxiao and his wife are still alive. However, Yu Siqing was very secretive. Even in the Yu clan, not many people knew about this. We've already done our best to investigate, but Yu Siqing is a sly old fox. Plus, this is something that happened more than a decade ago. It's not easy to investigate. Right now, not only have we planted spies near the Yu clan, we have also set our eyes on Lan Jingquang's family. Young master, please give us some more time. The man's tone was sincere and nervous. They never dared to neglect the young master's orders. Under the young master's orders, they had recently gathered people to investigate this matter. However, information about aristocratic families was one of the most difficult tasks to investigate, let alone a secret from more than 10 years ago. Once this news spread out, the Yu clan, Long clan, and the entire cultivation world would be shocked. At that time, Yu Siqing would become the target of public criticism. With Yu Siqing's status, she naturally knew how important this matter was, so she hid it well. We must find out. Mo Yunjue's voice was firm and resolute. No matter what, he had to find out the specifics. He didn't want to make Bailey Hongzhuang wait for too long. Thinking about it, Bailey Hongzhuang must be burning with anxiety. Yes, the man hurriedly replied. As long as the young master was willing to give them a chance, they would definitely find out the exact location and not disappoint him. However, when they heard the news, they were also very shocked. Chapter 1831. In the following period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang would meditate and cultivate during the day, and enter the desert world with Bewitching to cultivate at night. Under such circumstances, her speed of improvement was also very fast. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang, but Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu, after being stimulated by Bailey Hongzhuang, almost all of their thoughts were focused on cultivation. The cultivation resources given to them by Tiangang sect were extremely rich, and the biggest benefit was the Huayuan pill. This Huayuan pill was not used for eating, but for cultivation. There was an extremely pure yuan power in the Huayuan pill. When cultivating, you only needed to hold the Huayuan pill in your hand and run the cultivation method. The yuan power in the Huayuan pill would be absorbed into the meridians, thus strengthening the yuan power in the dantian. With the existence of this Huayuan pill, the cultivation speed of the cultivator would be a lot faster, and it would have the effect of getting twice the result with half the effort. The number of Huayuan pills given to them by Tiangang sect was not small, but the number of Huayuan pills needed to cultivate was even more astonishing. They naturally could not have so many cultivation pills for them to cultivate all the time. Therefore, after using up the Huayuan pills in their hands, they could only rely on meditation to improve their cultivation. It was precisely because of this that the Huayuan pill could now be said to be the most attractive pill for cultivators. Bailey Hongzhuang also used the Huayuan pill when she cultivated, but in addition to the cultivation resources she received as a disciple, her grandfather gave her more cultivation resources. Thinking of all the good things that her grandfather had done for her, she also understood that her grandfather wanted to make up for all the things that he had not been able to take care of her for so many years. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang could also refine the Huayuan pill by herself, but now the time could be said to be very tight, so she almost had no time to refine the pill. Alchemy was also a profession that she could not give up. However, she was now more focused on improving her cultivation. After all, the most important thing now was to improve her strength. The feeling of cultivating with the energy conversion pill is really too good. Now that I've used up all the energy conversion pills, just relying on meditation to cultivate feels really slow. Xia Jiqing faintly sighed. She had never felt the benefits of using the Huayuan pill before, but now that she felt it, she felt that the feeling was really good. In comparison, without the Huayuan pill, his cultivation speed was undoubtedly much slower. Looking at Xia Jiqing's frustrated and helpless appearance, Bai Junyu smiled and said, "Jiqing, you have broken through not long after coming to Tiangang sect. This cultivation speed is already very fast. A month will pass in the blink of an eye. After a few more days, we will be able to collect cultivation resources again." Hearing this, Xia Jiqing nodded. Now I can only think of it this way. I was too greedy. Now, she finally understood the difference between having and not having cultivation resources. With these cultivation resources, his cultivation speed could be said to be much faster. If she didn't have the cultivation resources given to her by Tiangang sect before, she would have needed a certain amount of time to break through. However, in less than half a month, she had made another breakthrough. This speed was much faster than before. Bai Junyu chuckled. This is human nature. Now, with Bai Junyu and Xia Jiqing getting along, the relationship between the two was also a lot closer. Chapter 1832. Boss has been leaving in the evening recently. I think she must have gone to find Bewitching. Otherwise, with Boss's desperate temperament, she will definitely stay in the arena day and night. Xia Jiqing laughed. She had been with Boss for so long, and had a certain understanding of Boss's character. It seemed that the existence of Bewitching still had a big impact on Boss. After experiencing so many things, now seeing that the relationship between Boss and Bewitching was so good, she was happy for Boss from the bottom of her heart. Yes, it should be like this. Bai Junyu couldn't help but think of the day when they went to get the cultivation resources. The young sect master had specially come to find Bailey Hongzhuang. In fact, they had only been separated for a short time, but the young sect master had specially come to find Bailey Hongzhuang. Just from this point, it could be seen how much the young sect master cared about Bailey Hongzhuang. The relationship between the young sect master and Hongzhuang is really enviable. In this world, there were not many lovers like the young sect master and Bailey Hongzhuang, who had such a good relationship. Thinking of this, Bai Junyu couldn't help but look at Xia Jiqing. What about them? Noticing Bai Junyu's gaze, Xia Jiqing was slightly stunned for a moment, and a guess immediately emerged in her mind. However, Bai Junyu didn't say it in the end, and she didn't say much. At this moment, a man appeared in front of Xia Jiqing, with a polite smile on his handsome face. Junior sister Xia, I'm Ji Wenshu. I want to be friends with you. What do you think? The sudden voice made Xia Jiqing feel a burst of surprise. She raised her eyes and quickly stood up. However, after seeing the appearance of the other party, Xia Jiqing's eyes couldn't help but change, and her whole person was a little stunned. The man in front of her was not unfamiliar. It was the man they met on the way to the resource hall to get the cultivation resources a few days ago. At that time, she had glanced at the other party. She didn't expect that the other party would appear in front of her now. Senior brother Ji. Xia Jiqing bowed, her expression revealing a bit of fear and a bit of shyness. This shyness wasn't because she liked Ji Wenshu, but because she remembered what Ji Wenshu had said that day. After all, at that time, Ji Wenshu had already expressed his affection for her. Bai Junyu's gaze also landed on Ji Wenshu. When he heard Ji Wenshu's words that day, he had already remembered Ji Wenshu. After that, he didn't see Ji Wenshu come, so he didn't take it to heart. He didn't expect that Ji Wenshu would take the initiative to talk to Xia Jiqing today. He couldn't help but feel a sense of threat. Jiqing's looks had always been outstanding, and it was normal for men to like her. Ji Wenshu's appearance wasn't bad either, and he was probably stronger than him by a few notches. His refined and courteous appearance made it impossible for anyone to dislike him. Ji Wenshu didn't miss Xia Jiqing's slightly red face, and his eyes suddenly brightened. As early as the first time he saw Xia Jiqing, he felt that Xia Jiqing was his goal. However, these days, he had been thinking about how to get close to Xia Jiqing without appearing too abrupt, or making Xia Jiqing feel disgusted. Chapter 1833. After thinking about it for a long time, Ji Wenshu decided to take the initiative to meet Xia Jiqing. If the young sect master's wife was here, he would have some restrictions, but the young sect master's wife left at night, so he decided to take advantage of this opportunity to get to know her. At this moment, seeing Xia Jiqing blushing, he was more and more sure that Xia Jiqing must have a good impression of him. Otherwise, Xia Jiqing would not blush at all. Thinking of this, Ji Wenshu felt a burst of joy. It seemed that this time, he really had hope. It has been a year since I came down to Tiangang sect. When I first saw junior sister Xia a few days ago, I was shocked. It's just that I have not been very good at communication, so it was not until today that I took the initiative to make friends with junior sister Xia. I hope that junior sister Xia can give me a chance to become friends. Ji Wenshu's face was filled with a faint warm smile, looking at Xia Jiqing with eyes full of appreciation and expectation. Noticing Ji Wenshu's undisguised gaze, Xia Jiqing was also very embarrassed. Although she usually had a carefree appearance, she had no experience in this kind of thing. Thinking about it, when a person expressed his affection for her without any disguise, there would always be a different feeling in her heart. Although Ji Wenshu said that it was only an opportunity to make friends, it was obvious that Ji Wenshu came with the purpose of pursuing her. Since we are both cultivating in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, and senior brother Ji is my senior brother, we are friends. Xia Jiqing smiled. However, when she was talking, Xia Jiqing could not help but look at Bai Junyu. She wanted to know what kind of expression Bai Junyu would have in such a situation. Bai Junyu looked at Ji Wenshu in front of him, and only felt very unhappy. As a man, he was very clear about Ji Wenshu's thoughts. Obviously, Ji Wenshu wanted to pursue Xia Jiqing. His intentions were so obvious, so open. If it was an ordinary person who was secretive, it might make people feel a little disgusted. However, in the face of such an open Ji Wenshu, who only had appreciation and admiration in his eyes, he simply could not find anything to hate. However, he was still very unhappy with Ji Wenshu, very, very unhappy. Over the past few days, his relationship with Jiqing had gradually improved. He had been looking forward to getting closer to Jiqing, but he hadn't expected Ji Wenshu to appear out of nowhere. The situation had become much more complicated. He didn't know how Jiqing felt about him, but the thought of Jiqing being with someone else was something he couldn't imagine and couldn't accept. Even though there were many thoughts in his mind, Bai Junyu's face did not reveal anything. After all, he could not show weakness in front of his love rival. After Xia Jiqing noticed that Bai Junyu's expression was natural, and there was no change, her heart was a little more depressed. It seems that Bailey Hongzhuang, and her previous judgment is wrong. Bai Junyu doesn't like her at all. If he really liked her, how could Bai Junyu turn a blind eye to her? Since junior sister Xia has agreed, then it is my honor. Ji Wenshu's face was brimming with joy and a handsome smile. We can keep in touch in the future. If junior martial sister Xia has any questions, feel free to ask me. I will tell you everything I know. Chapter 1834. Ji Wenshu left after chatting with Xia Jiqing for a while. After all, the cultivation field was not a suitable place to talk. A group of cultivators were working hard to cultivate. If they kept talking, it would undoubtedly affect the other cultivators. Xia Jiqing sat down and did not think much about it. She was ready to continue cultivating. Bai Junyu's performance just now really disappointed her. She felt that she should completely dispel this idea. Liking someone who did not like her was a very painful thing in itself. If Bai Junyu really did not like her, then she should get rid of it as soon as possible. Otherwise, if she continued to sink in such love, the only one who would suffer in the end would be herself. He seems to like you very much. Bai Junyu's voice quietly passed into Xia Jiqing's ears. Xia Jiqing's heart was even more painful, but there was no expression on her face. Maybe he should be a good person. When her voice fell, Xia Jiqing no longer said anything, and began to cultivate. After Bai Junyu saw that Xia Jiqing did not say much to him, his heart sank. He remembered Jiqing's shyness when she faced Ji Wenshu. When he thought of that scene, he felt a piercing pain. Xia Jiqing did not like him after all. From the first time he saw Xia Jiqing at Kanglan College, he liked her. Although Xia Jiqing was usually careless and spoke without scruples, he just liked Xia Jiqing's cheerful and sunny appearance. Unknowingly, they had been together for so long. He also wanted to confess, but Xia Jiqing's attitude made him unable to be sure of the answer. If he was wrong, he was worried that he could no longer be friends with Xia Jiqing in the future. After getting along for so long, he was also very familiar with Xia Jiqing's character. If Xia Jiqing hated someone, she hated that person from the bottom of her heart. If his confession was not successful, Xia Jiqing was likely to hide from him in the future. He did not want things to become like this. Now, after seeing Xia Jiqing's attitude, he was even more fortunate that his choice was not wrong. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would not be able to see Jiqing now, let alone cultivate with Jiqing. When Bailey Hongzhuang came to the field, she found that there was something wrong between Bai Junyu and Xia Jiqing. She couldn't help but frown. The three beasties had also followed Bailey Hongzhuang to the arena today. They had never seen the arena of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, so they were very curious. Therefore, when Bailey Hongzhuang left Bewitching's palace to practice, they immediately requested to follow Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally didn't mind. The three beasts had always been with her. Wow, this meditation field looks really spectacular. Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with amazement. The dense crowd of cultivators sitting there gave off a feeling of vastness at first glance. As expected of the world-famous Tiangang sect, this is really a big deal. Xiao Bai also couldn't help but sigh. They had seen a lot of things, but this was the first time they had encountered such a situation. Thinking about it, It may be that their understanding of the sect had stopped thousands of years ago, so they felt unspeakable novelty about everything now. I feel that cultivating here is a very interesting thing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.